It's a great honor to be here today. Thanks for inviting me. Very humbling experience because I guess, I just left academia myself, as the talk title says. And what I really want to do today is give you a very honest just view of how I experienced the foundation of Allcyte, my first company. I've been involved in a couple of other projects before, but this is really the first company that I started. What happened, how we did it, what were the challenges, what the success stories. Really with the goal to demystify the process a bit. I took the step of going into my own startup because I had friends and I knew people who had done it before. I'd been to similar talks, and this really gave me the security and kind of the role models to say, yes, this is possible. This is not witchcraft. You can do this. And basically, that's also what I want to do today. What I definitely don't want to do and can't do is share my great experience, whatever. I'm 32 years old. I'm doing this for the first time. Maybe in a year's time, I'll say, oh my God, what I said today is completely stupid. But I think this is also part of the learning process of starting a startup and doing it, and it really generates a lot of experience. Yeah, the outline of my talk will be following really like the phases of a startup. Idea creation, conception, really pouring the idea into first business model. Commitment, really saying, okay, let's do it. Put pen on paper and money on the bank account. Validating your business model. In the end, it's a massive experiment. You say, I think I can make money with a certain idea. You don't know until you really test it in the market. And then when you have passed that, or when you find out, actually, my first business model wasn't that smart, maybe we need to pivot a bit, how you can then drive to growth. And we are, I think, at this stage now where we are leaving validation and hopefully soon entering growth, but not quite there yet. Yeah, I was born in Vienna, 32 years old. I think this has already been said. What really brought me into entrepreneurship, and I had a bit of a problem in that I always liked science a lot, but not enough to say, oh, I commit to a full scientific career, because you really need to be committed and focused on your particular pathway to be successful there. You need your papers. And I was always interested in business, but I couldn't really say, and I decide to say, okay, I go into banking or into consulting or do something completely different. I wanted kind of the interface of these two. And entrepreneurship seemed like a very attractive idea. You have science, in particular when you do it in biotech, you have your business aspects, you work with people. I like this a lot. What really held me back for a long time was this big weight of risk, right? It's a daunting experience. You go into your startup, you can fail. 90% of startups fail. And this vision of going bust was really something I said, how do I deal with this? In the end, what helped me was friends, seeing other people do it, and then really saying, okay, what is the worst thing that can happen if I go bust with this company? I'll certainly not lose anything, or not everything, if I stick to a simple rule, let's only invest the money that I can really spare into my own company. And believe me, your investors will do the same, right? If you go to a business angel, if they are smart, they won't say, I put everything into your company, but they will put money that they can spare into it, playing money in the end. And then the upside, actually, what you can get out of it if you do it is also really high. You can get a lot of experience in a short period of time, meet great people. At my young age, I can talk to people who are 20 years older in really high positions in Novartis, Roche, and so on. They are interested in what we are doing and listening to us. And this is something that you, in a corporate, probably don't get that quickly. And whilst you're doing your startup, you also generate a lot of ideas. So really the worst thing that can happen when you fail with your company is say, okay, I lost a bit of money, didn't kill me, I gained a lot of experience, have a great network, have a couple of many new ideas. Let's either do the next or go back into industry, right? So it's really not that daunting. And really this exercise of thinking, what is the baseline that you can drop to really help me to say, okay, I can manage this risk, I can live with that. Now, the idea, what do you start your startup on? And this is what I'm getting asked a lot. Like, how did you come up with this idea? Tomorrow I'm meeting somebody from ex-consultant that I want to start a startup, but I don't really have an idea. How do you get there? And the problem with ideas is it's really difficult to have good ones. And I would like to cite here Goethe, actually. The worst is that the very hardest thinking will not bring thoughts or ideas. They must come like good children of God and cry, here we are. You expend effort and energy thinking hard, and then after you have given up, they come sauntering with their hands in the pockets. If the effort had not been made to open the door yet, who knows when they could have come. And I think this is a very smart saying, because it says you can't really force an idea, but you can prepare for it. And if you ask me now, do you have an idea for another startup? I would say, yeah, well, yes, maybe. But would you have an idea? Because in biotech, I've been thinking about it a lot and had a lot of time. But if you ask me, do you have an idea in fintech? I would say, no idea. I wouldn't even be able to generate one of it. But I think what can, like from the top of my head, but I think what you can really do is to create an environment for yourself that eventually you will get a good idea that you can then transform into a business. And I'll show you how it happened for me. But first I would like to really look at the ingredients. I think what is really important is that you give your brain enough food for thought, like stimulation, read, talk to people, mentors, and so on. Cultivate the right mindset for entrepreneurship. I know in science it's very hard. You're forced to really think of your particular pathway, be an expert in your particular field. But if you want to spot a good idea that can also be brought into a company, you really need to think broader. You need to have some sort of idea of the legal aspects of the market. What could people need? What do physicians need? What do patients need? So that you have a prepared mind. And then when you give your brain time to relax and really think about things, maybe in the shower, maybe when you go to sleep, that you can then say, oh, that's it, and really spot the opportunity and then follow it up. And in my particular case, how we came up with this idea with Allcyte, well, there were these three guys. Giulio Superti-Furga, director of CeMM, some of you may know him. He was a mentor who I had really stayed in touch and cultivated, so to say, for quite some time. I met him at an event in Vienna, I think 10 years ago or something like that, long before I even thought about coming to CeMM. We talked, I stayed in touch, and I really sent him a message every 6 months or so, which then allowed me to go back to him and say, hey, I've just finished my PhD. I don't really know what to do next, but I want to do something that is at the interface of business and science. And then he said, well, come to my institute and talk to these two people, Baron Snyder, now professor at ETH, and Greg Vladimir. By the way, all three of them are now my co-founders in this company. So basically, staying in touch with Giulio gave me the opportunity then to meet other people, and they showed me something completely crazy. They had started doing high-content microscopy of human blood, and everyone back at that time 4 years ago said, guys, you are stupid, you can't do this. High-content microscopy, basically, some of you may know, is the automated imaging of large numbers of cells, typically adherent cells, in a computer-driven fashion. And why adherent cells? Because you need to stain them, you need to fix them in place, you need to wash them to be able to get rid of imaging agents. So everyone said, these blood cells, they don't adhere, they don't stick to plastic, you can't do it, go home. Well, we proved the naysayers wrong. And we managed to establish a very simple yet smart pipeline that allows us to take blood samples, bone marrow samples, so essentially non-adherent cells, cultivate them in what we call confocal monolayers at the bottom of specially shaped wells, treat them with drugs, fix them, stain them with fluorescently labeled antibodies, and then take images of them. So basically we broke the paradigm that high-content imaging was only limited to adherent cell lines, but we extended it also to blood. By the way, 2 years later, somebody even published this in a little article and said, oh, this is impossible, we have now found the solution. Fortunately, our patent was already filed 2 years before that. And we can do this at scale, and this is really cool. We can, with our platform, take 10,000 of images, 10,000 images of blood cells in 3 and 4 well plates, roughly within an hour. This is about 10 million cells per run. We can then analyze for each individual cell how did it respond to drugs that were previously incubated in these plates. We use AI-driven image analysis to then classify these cells. What type of cells are they? How did they respond to drugs? Did they change their shape? And so on and so forth. We can aggregate the single cell data and say how these blood cells or like cells from bone marrow responded to drugs. Back at that time, this was basically as far as it went. We can image blood, we can look what drugs do to it. We had no idea what to use it for, but already when I talked to this guy, I had the feeling, oh, there is something about it, because I was very much into drug discovery, screening, I already had some background from ETH and that, so it kind of fit into the right bill and said, yeah, let's explore this further. Coincidence number 1, meeting these people. Then there was another coincidence. Again, it was brought about by us talking to a lot of people. We linked up with physicians at ETH and told them, hey, we can do this. Are you interested? We would like to do drug discovery in blood. Completely crazy idea at this stage. Can you send us some samples? And I said, yeah, here we send you some samples. Send us the data back. Okay, great. We did that. And then one afternoon, one professor, Philipp Staber, came back and said, hey, by the way, guys, I have some really cool data for you. I took the second top blood drug from one particular sample that you sent me. This was, by the way, a patient who I was treating who was in dire need of a salvage therapy, and I put this drug into the patient. Our jaws dropped because we thought we are going to go to jail now for this. But they said, we're allowed to do that because this patient is in dire need for salvage therapy. It's the last resort we have. And guess what? This patient responded. Patient number 1. And to us, this was like, wow, that's cool. Maybe we have found something really useful here that can prioritize drugs for patients. I would also like to say at this stage, however, this was complete coincidence. Yes, we kind of improved our chances of having this lucky moment by talking to a lot of people and keeping our network open. But the mere fact that this first patient responded, had a particular mutation that made him prone to response to ibrutinib was complete luck. But I think a lot in these startups, it's about trying to generate as many opportunities as possible and then seizing the opportunity when you have it. But this was not down to us being so smart. This was very, very lucky. Well, the physicians at AKH tried this again and again and again because they said, hey guys, we are really desperate. We need something to help these poor patients. And after about a year, more than 17 patients in this interim analysis, we're showing exactly 17 patients, had been put onto therapies that have been prioritized using our high-content imaging platform, by the way, that we call pharmacoscopy, so imaging the action of drugs. And what we found was actually quite astounding. We had an 88% response rate. It is very difficult to treat late-stage hematological cancer patient population. And we saw that compared to the previous line of therapy, we had an increase in the response duration also of these patients. We couldn't set this up in any way, in any other way, because this was not a formal study under AMG and so on. So it was basically a retrospective analysis of individual patient cases. But this is something you can or would get FDA approval for if you could demonstrate this in such a population with a drug. We had been able to do this by prioritizing existing drugs already. So at this stage, we said, look, we really have here a system that allows us to gain kind of a preview of how patients will respond to a particular therapy by functionally measuring how drugs work in their samples. This is valuable. Let's start a company. This was kind of the eureka and the initial moment, like, let's start Allcyte. Well, saying I will start this company and having a great, vague idea of what to do is really only the beginning. Boiling such an idea then down to something that is implementable and can be reduced to practice is a completely different ball game. And you'll see this very often, visionaries telling you, oh, do this, go into that direction, but then these things need to meet the test of the real world. And this is what I call the conception phase, and what really then took us more than a year to really develop the first initial business model. And this is really a very circular process, unfortunately not linear at all. You formulate a business hypothesis saying, what am I going to sell to whom and how? Then you test it. Does it meet the requirements of legal regulations of the market and so on? Find out, no, it doesn't work. You're fine. You go in circles and in circles. And just to give you an understanding of how complex this is just a mind map of a couple of factors that you need to take into account when you think about developing a product in the biotech field. Legal boundaries. Technology, what is possible, science, can I afford it, IP, patients, what do they want, what do they need, medical factors, regulatory factors, and so on and so forth. And this is also what I meant in the beginning with preparing your mind. The broader you read in the beginning, the more you get information in the beginning, the more successful you can make your company because you can spot obvious and stupid mistakes early. One example that we spotted, only 1 year in, was the whole question of payers. Who pays for something? just imagine how stupid it would be if you found out, let's say, 3 years or 4 years, and after having spent 20 million euros into the development of your molecule or your diagnostic test, that you have no idea of how to really get other people to pay for it and get it approved by an insurance agency or something like that. So I think even though this sounds daunting here at this stage, really trying to be as broad as possible and really playing devil's advocate and trying to destroy your own business model with as mean arguments as possible, as early as possible, I think is a very valuable exercise and will help you to really filter the ideas that may likely fly from those that will definitely not. Just to give you some examples of the ideas that we had with our pharmacoscopy platform. Make a pharmacoscopy machine, for example, a machine that takes in bloods and spits you out a plot to say this is the top drug. What do you think could possibly go wrong? Any ideas? Making a machine is extremely expensive, right? A medical device machine. So that's like not our core competency, we can't do this. Let's do a private clinic. By the way, I have a competitor who is having a similar technology and say, I'm going to start a private clinic where I treat patients based on these data outcomes. Me starting a clinic, where do you see the problems? Or do you see any problems? I'm not a doctor, exactly. So we said, look, cool idea, but this would be 10% of our work, like this pharmacoscopy. It's not the core business, let's not do it. Exactly. Chemotyping, very funny idea. The idea was to say, oh, we take blood from a patient, treat it with 100 different drugs, we get a fingerprint and see how the different molecules affected different cell types in there, and this fingerprint is cool, and maybe we can use it for something diagnostic. Maybe it tells you whether I will die early or not, or whether I will get cancer or not. I mean, completely crazy, very interesting scientifically, but to validate such an idea takes far too long, right? So you need to really cut at this stage and say, okay, what can I possibly achieve and what not? But these were realistic ideas, and I'm sure in the future they will have their value, but not at this stage of the company. Then we went to more realistic ideas, saying, okay, we generate these data for individual patients, let's sell the data to doctors and help them treat their patients better. Well, the problem is there's something called medical product law and medical device law. You're not allowed to do this without a CE mark. And then we said, okay, let's do two things. Let's really develop in vitro diagnostic tests, so fully certified tests that we can use to tell patients, our doctors, what to treat their patients with. Great thing. Patient responds to the drugs that he or she is getting, less hospitalization, everyone should be happy. So we thought, I'll come back to that later. Then the other thing is, if we can tell a doctor what to treat a patient with, well, we can also help the pharmaceutical industry, because they have all these opportunities with their molecules in their pipeline. Going into a clinic costs really a lot of money. If we could give them a preview of what would work in what indication, we could save them a lot of money. So two kind of aspects of the same, or two sides of the same coin. And we formulated back then, basically actual graphics from back then, like the House of Allcyte, how we do that. Pharmacoscopy as our core technology, and we do two things. We work with pharma companies to help them match their drugs to the right indication. We develop in vitro diagnostic tests for personalized cancer medicine, who to treat with what drug at what time, and then maybe in the future we could talk about drug discovery. We were very much aware that this was a mixed business model at this stage, but we said, look, we at this stage don't really know what will work and what will not. Let's try these things and see what sticks. At that stage, it was really the time to say, okay, let's put money on the table, let's move forward and really start this company. And committing, when you are in your academic environment, to saying, I step out and do this and do a startup, actually, at least for me, it was extremely hard. I feared that I was losing out, that I would kind of ruin my career, and I wouldn't be able to publish and people would not take me seriously or something like that. Retrospectively, and what I did, it was actually to kind of run the company and my postdoc 2 years side by side. Don't. It didn't work. It was a recipe for disaster for me. Because you can't focus. Academia and industry have, in my opinion, very different requirements and also very different value systems of what is being recognized in achievement and what not. And if you try to do both at the same time, you're basically pulled into two different directions and it breaks you. I'm not saying one is better or the other. Right? They both, like without being in academia, I would have not been able to go into this company. But doing it at the same time, I think is really, really difficult. In academia, I mean, you all know it. You need to make cool, novel new papers, publish high. In industry, well, what pharma companies really want to say, have you validated your assay? What data do you have to back up your claims? Don't have to have it published. You have to have it on a quality management system, for example, but publication is not that important. Academia, as I said, you need to focus on your area of expertise. In particular, when you're in the management of a startup, you need to have a broad view and see all sorts of different sides. Team versus individual. Yes, we all work in teams in academia, and we would not have been able to do it without teamwork. But in the end, you have one group leader, and it rarely ever happens that you have 10 people really pushing into the same direction, at least in life sciences. You sometimes have small teams, at least that's my experience. In our company, we can now have 10 people saying, you do software development and only for one thing. And we don't care whether we will publish that, but we want the best software for analyzing images the fastest in the cloud or something like that. In the end, I took the step 1.5 years ago, and I think it was a great decision. I never regretted it. I can only say that. But this is a very personal opinion of mine. Yeah, once I had taken this decision, it was really a very linear process to foundation. We assembled a team, now the full team here, and I think it's very important that you have a balanced team here. Giulio certainly brought us all together. He has a massive network, helped us get our first pharmaceutical partner, foundation. He has experience. Berend, he is not operative in the company, but he was kind of the computational mastermind. Greg was the wet lab mastermind in this company, and really these guys here together was a genius duo of prototypical crazy scientists, if I'm allowed to say that, sorry guys, in a very good way. Me, I was more like the down-to-earth guy and really trying to say, okay, how can we get this crazy idea and get traction? How can we reduce it to practice? And I think having this very diverse team in one company is extremely important. Yes, it will create tension, and it did create tension, but you need this diversity to really strive. Writing of the first business plan, oh my God, it felt like writing the first essay at university. I didn't know how to do it. It was really tough, but in the end, nobody read it, I guess, in full. But it was really, really important for me because it allowed me to focus. The process of writing forced me to structure the thoughts, and I got so many new ideas of what do we need to think of as well, on top of what we have already been thinking about before. Licensing, we needed to get the technology out of CeMM. CeMM was a great partner here, but there were other parties involved that made life really difficult for us. And unfortunately, it is still a fact that many academic institutions are not used to negotiating licensing agreements. They have thoughts of oh, this is worth so much, and then ask for shares in revenue or something like that. That would kill a company. That was a tough fight, and what I really hope is that there will be standards and really that tech transfer offices like you have it here will be trailblazers and establish standards for what can be done and what not. I think this would really help startups and would have shaved off, I think, half a year from our foundation timeline. Partnerships, we needed access to tissues, so we had to negotiate a partnership with medical university. We also negotiated a partnership with Boehringer Ingelheim at the same time to really get traction and first endorsement by a pharmaceutical company. We had to get financing. Again, Giulio was instrumental here as the senior guy with a lot of networking experience who brought the first business angels in. And then actually putting this all together, in the end, this foundation was an act of an afternoon. We went to the lawyers, we had already agreed on the key terms, signed it, and that was it. So that is not the big issue. And this process was actually quite streamlined and fast. What then really was tough was once the company was in the Firmenbuch, so on the company register, and really making it live and building it up. Very early on in this process, we fortunately already got some endorsement from the public, from the market, from major players in the field, which helped us a lot. Google brought a story about us because we had been running all the analytics, like all the data image analysis in the cloud already from the very beginning. That's what's good for marketing. Boehringer Ingelheim signed a deal with us and was generous enough to put also a press release out, which put us on the forefront of, for example, or like at the headlines of BioCentury. And we also managed to publish our first paper. I said publication is not that important in biotech. Not quite true. It's not the primary goal, but publications are sometimes kind of currencies where you can say, oh, I go to a big pharma company and say, hey guys, the peers have validated that. They think this is good. This is like publication worthy. And this does open a lot of doors. So we were very proud of this. Under the hood, I wouldn't say complete chaos, but it was very chaotic at the very beginning. And again, I was stuck in a situation where I was pulled in all sorts of different directions. We had the customer, Boehringer Ingelheim, saying, we want our milestones delivered, and we had to run, right? If you have a big company like Boehringer, your first customer, you don't want to fail them. So this is really where a lot of our effort went, getting equipment, labs, people, sample. At the same time, we wanted to develop a diagnostic test. Yeah, well, the spare time that we had went into that. And we somehow had to build structure, right? We were growing very rapidly in the first year. We grew from, I think, 2 people to 12. And digesting that from an organizational perspective was very tough. The way how we survived this was, in the end, triage. We said, what kills us? That we deal with first. Everything else we leave because we can't deal with it. Was one approach. The other one was get advisors in who can help you. Experienced people, for example, Thomas Fischer, our CFO, who helped me really build the whole accounting and controlling infrastructure. I said focus like Boehringer. I mean, IVD very soon came into under enormous pressure within our company, like this development of a personalized medicine test. For one, because there was the customer who required our undivided attention. And this is something people have since warned me a lot about. If you have these mixed business models and have a service arm or something like that, this may eat you up eventually. You may need to be very, very disciplined and say, this is what we give to the customer, this is what we take for our in-house development programs. So internal pressure of attention. But also regulatory pressure and economic pressure was increasingly coming down on this IVD business model. Regulatory, you may know that the in vitro diagnostic device regulation has been changed and will come into effect, I think, in 2023. Has made bringing a test for personalized medicine that really tests 100 drugs, something like that, will be tested in a clinic with medical university, basically almost impossible. I can go into the details if you're interested, but we would have had to run a trial for each individual drug that we had in our test separately, economically not viable, forget it. And then economic pressure. And I think I already mentioned this idea of, do you have people who actually pay for your product? And we said, well, personalized medicine, mega trend, market is gonna rise, there are lots of studies about it, certainly somebody will pay about it. I mean, pay for it, right? I mean, if I help a cancer patient survive longer, this is worth money. Well, the reality is unfortunately slightly more difficult. If you think about the cost of treating a cancer patient, you have your standard induction therapy, for example, 100,000 gone. Then you do several other cycles of therapy. Let's say each year costs another 100,000 and terminal care costs you another 100,000. Now, if I come and tell an insurance provider, oh, I can tell you much better which patient to treat with what, they'll say, great. You help my cancer patient survive longer for one more year, another 100,000 euros down the drain. That's bad for business. Well, they won't tell you that, but that's the economics that is happening, unfortunately. And thus, really, precision medicine or personalized medicine, as we would really like to see it, is extremely difficult to implement from an economic perspective. The only way where it really works is where you say, okay, I have a fixed amount of money that I'm allowed to spend per year on a patient, as they're doing it in the UK, and now I want to allocate that money as efficiently as possible with the highest effect. Then something like that works. But if you basically have a system where you pay for everything and, well, there are no caps, personalized medicine can really break the system and cost you a lot of money. And we basically did not feel ready to fight this through to the end against big insurance providers. And that said, look, we're too small for that. Let's table this for the time being until we find a big partner. What we really then focused on, this was kind of our first pivot point, was to say, okay, core competency. What are we really good at? And what do we really want to be good at in the future? Testing drug action in primary human tissues. That's all we do. And the business model that we knew that worked, because Boehringer had been working with us and 2 additional partners had been coming to work with us, was that of a service provider and saying we collect tissues from hospitals, we collect molecules from big pharma, we test them in our system to give big pharma a preview of what molecule will work in what indication. And that now is a business model where I can actually save a lot of money. Because if I, as a pharma company, need to go into 5 different indications to find the one that works, I spend 5 times as much money than going into the right indication straight away. I can help them with answering this question, so I can actually generate value. This was a thought. To realize that took us quite some time, to be quite honest. Yeah, we are earning money through technology access, time and material, and milestones. However, we also see this as a jumping off point in the future for our own programs. And this is, again, going into a mixed business model direction, but there's precedence for that. There are countless of pharma companies or small biotechs who started out developing a technology as a service provider and then went into the direction of saying, okay, we're so good at this now, let's do our own programs. In a very large scale, Evotec, for example, is doing it at the moment. Big CRO, preclinical. They used to provide services for drug screening. Now they're also investing into their own internal programs. Many other examples as well out there. And that's where we really want to go eventually and say, okay, yes, we work with big pharma, but if we see, for example, an opportunity of a molecule that they have in their pipelines, don't use in a particular indication or don't want to use, why don't we out-license it and develop it maybe together with them, maybe alone, using again our platform as a personalized medicine kind of selection test, but really focusing on one molecule, one indication, one setting. I think that's a model that can really work. For the time being, we're still developing our technology in the service model, but that's kind of the vision and the future where we want to go and what will really generate the majority of the value. This brings me to a topic of growth. We have, I think over the last couple of months, really gone from this initial validation of our business model, of our service business model, now to a, okay, let's think about scaling type of attitude. Over the summer, we managed to sign up 2 additional customers. I'm not allowed to give their names, but basically we're now working with 3 major pharmaceutical companies just 2 years into our life. This is quite good, I think, for a small biotech. We have made steps into the solid tumor fields. Remember, we came out of the hemato-oncology space. This is about just 10% of the total market. We want to get into the solid tumor space, of course, 90%. That's where the high unmet medical need is. We have now made really good progress, and we'll show first data tomorrow to one of our customers, actually, on how we can measure drug action in these tissues. And we are becoming better and better at scaling our analysis pipelines. Yes, in the beginning, it was okay if we had somebody who was doctoring around with a couple of R scripts to analyze a certain piece of data. Now, as we want to grow, we really need to develop pipelines and be sure that we can efficiently, cost-effectively analyze these large imaging data. And a lot of work from a software development perspective is now going into that. There are lots of challenges ahead. Samples. I need access to primary human patient samples. Extremely difficult. But I also see a lot of value in that. I think this is going to be a major driver of future pharmaceutical innovation, being able to analyze what drugs do in primary human tissues. And we are now building our own networks. I think we have 30 study centers now working together with us all across Europe, from 1 last year up to that. We need to scale our service business. The more pharma companies we can work with, the more we can learn about our technology, the more value we can generate, the more we can generate revenues. And we want to use this money to really finance our own discovery, likely first in the hemato-oncology field, because there we have the most experience, and then going into solid tumors. But I think this is really going to be our end game. I want to have a molecule on the market eventually. Fear of failure at this stage, to be honest, I don't think about it very often. For me, the worst case scenario is clear. If the company fails now, I will have learned a lot. I will have met people I would never have met before. And I think I already have 2 or 3 ideas of what I could do after Allcyte. And I think also one thought that I found quite refreshing was, don't worry about failure. You only have to be right once in entrepreneurship, right? 1 exit is enough. And also when you think from a financing perspective, even for a business angel, 1 successful exit of 10 or 1 out of 5 will be enough to make quite a lot of money. Allcyte, of course, is not like a one-man show. I mentioned teams are really important. This is already like the picture from a couple of months ago, and we have added another 4 people to this. But really, I'm very lucky to work with an extremely committed, young, dynamic, smart, and fun team. And what we have implemented in our company, I don't know whether we'll be able to do it forever, but at least for now, everyone needs to kind of talk to every candidate, and we listen to everyone before we make a decision of who we hire. And if there's any justified or even an inkling of a doubt about somebody, we say no. And so far, we have really been very successful with this labor-intensive, but I think very tight recruitment strategy. Founders I've already outlined. I would also like here to mention our investors and thank them, Werner Landauer, CEO of Evotec, and Gustav Ammerer. They've been really instrumental in driving this forward. And coming now to the conclusion of my talk, I think key lessons for me so far is I've been able to accept risk in this field. I worry about what I can control and try not to worry too much about the rest. Otherwise, you go crazy. There are so many things that you simply cannot control in this field. And I try to really take 1 step at a time. It's really difficult as a scientist because you want to basically already know what is out there in the future. But I think to really pace yourself and say, let's focus on really perfecting our technology now. And then I'm confident I will be able to use it for something. I think this is something very important. Yeah, at times it's very challenging and frustrating. You're overwhelmed by requirements constantly. If you think you have solved them all, like there is some other request by some authority saying you need to generate these documents. Data protection, for example, I mean, extremely important, but the amount of paperwork that we need to generate as a startup and have generated in the past is sometimes debilitating. Lack of your own capacity. If I could clone myself, it would be really great, but I can't. If everyone could clone themselves in our company, it would be great, but we can't. However, I think the most important message is the single most fascinating and exciting thing I've ever done in my life. It's extremely challenging and fulfilling intellectually, maybe not as much as mathematics or something like that, but it is an intellectual challenge and an intellectual exercise in its own right. You have a very steep learning curve, it's very varied, and I think you have the privilege of working really with driven and great people. So if you have thought about entrepreneurship, I suggest think about it really hard and potentially even give it a try. I think at the very young age that we are, you can't possibly go wrong. So thanks for your attention. If you have any questions and points for discussion, I would really, love to answer them. Thank you.